Australia cannot ignore India. Both the countries gain from students who come here, they work, they could settle, or even the universities would gain the foreign currency, which goes on to fund the research with the universities. Just after COVID period, the number of international students who were stuck around the world or the new entrants, they've arrived in bigger numbers. They have worked here, they've been here for years, they have contributed to the economy, and they will try everything possible.
International student is definitely the backbone for the economy of the country.
And next 1 or 2 years is once again the time when Indian students would need options. Assume 270,000 students plus exempt categories. We are looking at somewhere around 350 to 400,000 students, which is much higher than 2023. And that made things a bit easier for a lot of middle class students.
voiceaajkal, our medium, your message.
Good day, everyone. My name is Navneet Anand from voiceaajkal, our medium, your message. International students have played a key role in the economy of the country, that is, for Australia. Today, I have my guest, none other than Ravi Lochan Singh, who has been there in the industry for 33 years, the founder, director, CEO for Global Reach. Raviji, welcome to the
Thanks,
show.
Navneet.
First of all, thank you so much for taking time out of my immediate request.
No, I've always got to take out time for you, Navneet. You do such a great job. Yeah.
Talking about international students, 33 years ago when you started versus today, any of the memories that you still cherish of the time when you started the company?
Well, I think things have changed. The year that I came to Australia in 1990 as an international student, there were only 200 students who had come to Australia. And out of the 200, probably 100 would be sponsored or on some scholarships. So when you really think of it from that time to now, now we call it an industry. Maybe we exaggerate when we call it an industry, but it has become sizable. And in fact, if you really look through the newspapers, the biggest discussion point for the Australian government is immigration and international students at this point of time.
Before I talk about education being an industry or immigration being an industry, taking you back to 1990, the challenges that you faced at that time versus the student that have the challenges now. What is the basic difference that you see between the two?
Navneet, one of the biggest things, I don't know whether today's generation would really realize, there was no internet, there was no in fact, there was not even anything like an email. Mobile phones didn't exist. So the source of getting information was not as easy as it is today for students. So today, let's say you or I, if we talk to a student, the student can Google, look up the information, cross-check, find out information, and then actually decide. But way back in 1990 or 1991, when we were whether trying to apply ourselves or guiding students just didn't know how to get the information. So that's one side of it. So there, I think the education consultants or the advisors really pitched in because we would stock the brochures well in advance, talk to the students through the processes, talk to the parents. And so that was one side of it. The other side was that before 1990 or 1991, only those who could be really considered really rich or who were getting full scholarship would go overseas to study. So in 1991, the Indian government liberalized its foreign exchange, and that made things a bit easier for a lot of middle class students who could now aspire to go overseas to study. So things started changing in the 90s. It's a very, it sounds very simplistic today because we just can't imagine a world without internet, but that was the world.
You're talking about the middle class families, kids started coming overseas. I came here in Australia in February 1995 as an international student as well. I still remember there were no signs of keeping the data electronically anyway. We were issued the acceptance advice, which we take the physical copy to the embassy to get the visa done. Pre-visa approvals kind of period.
And fax machines and couriers we relied on, and completely a different world from then to now.
talking about situation today, international students industry has gone ups and downs number of times.
Yeah, I mean, I keep telling people that Indian students will keep going overseas to study. It's not that it's going to end today. There will be ups and downs, and the types of courses study would change, the destinations would change. But Indian students have historically been traveling around the world to get education, to be able to work, maybe even settle overseas.
Settling overseas, coming as an international student, settling overseas, there are many examples I have seen, even in the field of education. There are individuals who have set wonderful institutes and are doing a wonderful job by serving the community as well as doing the business, keeping the ties between two countries as strong as one can.
Absolutely. We're sitting in Australia, which is a multicultural country. In fact, I can't, if you ask me who's an Australian, it'll be very difficult to define because almost everyone is a migrant from around the world. If you look at the Indian diaspora, it has become very sizable today. You actually are very active in the diaspora. And I would say that 9 out of 10 members in the Indian diaspora would have arrived here as an international student. And that's pretty sizable. Now, when a 9 out of 10 families would have had someone or other arriving as an international student, that's how this diaspora has been built. So the role of international education cannot be undermined at all.
Role of education cannot be undermined, but role of education bringing international students in the countries like Australia, where this is a kind of an export business for the country.
Yeah. See, it is an export business for the country. It is an extremely important earning for big universities because they fund their research from it. It is a soft power for Australians when these students go back and occupy prominent positions in their own home country. It's a very major, you can say, bridge between two nations. And I'm not just talking between India and Australia, but I think around the world. And so when I really think of it, Navneet, it's sometimes very simplistic when we just talk of it in terms of dollar or in terms of export earning. It is very important. It is an export earning. But is it only one way? I tend to question it. In fact, both the countries gain from students who come here, they work, they could settle, or even the universities would gain the foreign currency, which goes on to fund the research that the universities engage in.
I think not only the dollar value of the finances I should be talking here, it is rather the brains that are coming to the country.
I mean, relatively speaking, Australia is a younger country in terms of migration. If you see what's happening in the US or the UK, it actually gives you some indication where Australia would be in the years ahead. Look around and saw Kamala Harris's mother arrived as an international student, and then she was the contender for the president's position. Or you look through other countries where you would find similarly someone or other who has gone from being an international student to being a local. In Australia, it will take some time. We are seeing challenges, but the second generation, that means your and my kids, would have much bigger footing here to play. And I think in the next 10 years, you would see number of people of Indian origin rising to positions of power and influence in this country.
I normally call it Australians of the Indian heritage that are making a point, making the difference in the society as well. Not only the ethnic society, on the bigger frame, on the bigger stand, I could see them making the changes in the country. If you look at the president of Science Academy here in Canberra, is owned by an Australian of the Indian heritage.
Yeah. I'm sure the same would apply in various IT companies around the country, engineering firms, business houses, banking sector. There are a number of Australians of Indian origin or Indian heritage who are doing very well.
I happened to meet the Minister of Education for India as well as Australia a couple of weeks ago, and the discussions were going of introducing Hindi in the school curriculum, not only at the primary, but at the kindergarten as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fantastic because I just recently I met a few people who were busy setting up a Jain temple in Girivin,
Mhm.
and I found that to be very interesting because my impression that Jains was not such a big community here, but I was told there are 1,500 Jains and they are building a Jain temple in Girivin. In Sydney. So the point that I'm trying to make here is gradually every part of India, every community, every linguistic group is trying to make its own presence felt here.
While talking to these education representatives from the Department of Education, both from India and Australia, what they were talking about, the Australian side introducing the ESOS Bill. There were a lot of and there were a lot of welcome as well because the caps were being decided for the institutions. May it be right or wrong, may it be fair or unfair, that's a different point to be discussed. What's your say on that ESOS Bill?
Yeah, firstly, let's go back and say, well, ESOS Bill has many aspects to it. So caps is only one aspect where the minister gets the power to set these limits. And that is what's been opposed in the parliament. But let's go one step back. Why was this discussion happening? The number of arrivals from overseas into Australia has increased after COVID.
Yes.
During just after COVID period, the number of international students who were stuck around the world or the new entrants, they have arrived in bigger numbers. Second thing is the government made some easier policies for those who were here in terms of unrestricted work hours and things like that, which led to the net overseas migration number, or which they call norm, increasing quite a bit.
Now, I think it was almost a double.
Yeah, but that's because you're only seeing people arrive here. You're not seeing people exit.
Exit.
Net comes from people exiting. And you and I both know that somebody who's here and is wanting to get permanent residency firstly explores various options to get it. And only once he doesn't find an option, he would exit.
100%.
Right. And this has been happening for a long time. The government has put in a few policy changes, like you can't apply from a
temporary visa to student
from
visa.
a visitor visa to a student visa, or you can't apply from a post-study work back to a student visa. So these changes have been applied only in July of this year. Now, some of those students or those affected migrants or temporary migrants, the government calls them temporary permanent. It's a very interesting term because these are temporary visa holders, but they aren't really going back. I would feel that it would take another year or so before we start to see some of them either go back and apply for a student visa to come back again or something else. Why I say 1 year? Because they'll obviously go to the appeal process. The government may hasten that process from 2 years to 1 year, and not everybody applies for an asylum or protection.
The cost
visa.
involved with that.
Yeah, there is cost and there is family consideration. They will use all legal methods available to them, as they should. They have worked here, they've been here for years, they have contributed to the economy, and they will try everything possible.
The prime time of their life, the youth, they have spent in this country while studying and working, injecting the dollar value back to the system, as well as getting their kids to start going to the school and interacting and gelling with the local.
Yeah. So again, your question was around why caps, and I'll again come to it. So when somebody has put in the money into education, has gained a local qualification, has worked for a few years, then of course he falls in love with Australia.
Why not?
And it's a country, and for Australia too, he would make a better migrant as compared to someone just arriving without the local qualification. So when you really think of it in that sense, Navneet, it seems like a win-win. But sometimes it's not that simple. Now the Australian government has been under a lot of pressure because of this burgeoning international student numbers. And it's become a topic, or the major topic for the which is going to happen in the next 6 months. So the government has somehow entangled the increase in international students with housing crisis and increased cost of living for local Australians. Now, there are tons of research done to it that the impact that international students have on housing shortage is very minimal. If there is anything, it is very, very minimal. It is not the way it has been picturized to the which they get a feeling that, hey, if your costs have gone up, it's because of international students coming in. They forget that the international students actually help bring down the costs. They provide the workforce to the restaurants, to the shops, and a whole lot of it. They man your gas stations, they do your Uber deliveries. If that workforce goes away, your cost of living will go up much faster. Also, the housing the international students tend to use housing of a different kind as compared to the local Australians. So also, let's leave that on one side. But the other thing is, so that became a big issue. Now, the government, under pressure to reduce or limit the international student numbers, announced almost several months ago that, well, we will put an upper limit to international student numbers in Australia. They fixed a number of 270,000 students is what can enter in 2025.
Will that include the student visa extensions within the country, or will that be 270 coming only from overseas?
Yeah, 270, any place occupied at a university. Mm-hmm. Now, they also introduced a number of exempt categories, like those who are doing PhDs and research, those who are doing LE course, because eventually they'll go on to a degree. So they were not counted in this figure. Now, this is where the interesting bit comes in. The ESOS Bill has cleared the lower house of Parliament, went to the Senate. It went through several rounds of debate and discussions in the Senate. And then yesterday, or Monday, which is 18th of November, it went back to the Senate for a final approval. Now, this is where the catch happens. The government, which is the Labour government, was under the impression that it will get support from the coalition. Because in May this year, Peter Dutton had gone on record to say that they want to see lower number of migrants.
He was rather more stringent.
He is still more stringent, and he in fact talked about a much lower number. So at that time, they indicated that they will go with the government and support, and that's how it cleared the lower house of Parliament. But yesterday, there was an about turn. So the government had not planned for it. And this is the last sitting of the Parliament this year, and possibly could even be the last opportunity for the bill to clear before the. So yesterday, what we saw was the Greens were opposing it, and hats off to them. They are the only ones who have stayed on with their policy. It is the same policy from day one. They have not favored the bill right from the very beginning. They have been pro-migrants, and they've said that, well, we don't like such kind of restrictions happening. So that was Senator Faruqi. She herself is a migrant, and she's the one who led the Greens campaign against the bill. However, because the government felt that the Labour will get support from coalition, it'll sail through with the bill. So yesterday morning, we saw the Liberals, or the coalition opposition, do an about turn, and without that, the bill cannot pass.
What could be the reasons?
Well, the reasons came out very late in the evening yesterday, because on the floor of the Parliament, Senator Sarah Ferguson went on to the Parliament floor, and they gave the reasons why they are not backing the bill. And her reasons were completely different to what Green's reasons was. Mm-hmm. She actually said that the government should make it much lower level of caps, should allow less students. And what Sarah Ferguson actually went on to say was that she is against these exemption or the exempt categories. Mm-hmm. She said that the government, if we really look at the total number of students coming in 2025, assume 270,000 students plus exempt categories, we are looking at somewhere around 350 to 400,000 students, which is much higher than 2023. And so on the back of it, they went back and pulled off the bill. They also, I personally think that they had really made it an issue, because they kept talking about the housing crisis and cost of living. You say these things because you want the voters to hear those things. Those are not economists, that they will do the maths here. So the message, when they go into the elections next year, they will say, we want much lower numbers to what Labour is trying to do, so please vote for me. And Labour will go to the elections to say that we were already putting a cap. Liberals has not done it, so vote for me. Both are going to talk to the same audience, which wants lesser student numbers.
As an industry expert, What's your opinion on the numbers?
Well, to be honest, there are two things. I personally think 270,000 students plus exempt was a happy story.
Mhm.
Why? Because for me, as a businessman, when I say for myself, it's actually reflective of many players in the industry. 2023 was a good year. It was actually the best year on date for the last 10, 15 years. In fact, 2024 is a lower year to 2023. So had the caps passed, except for a handful of the universities, the students had options at various institutions. So that's the first thing. So I was opposing the caps. Many of us opposed the caps because we don't want to give the minister a kind of a social license to set such limits. That's on the principles ground. But overall, we had begun to accept the caps by now.
Mhm.
So that is the first thing. Several universities had closed their intake for 2025. Some universities had increased fees. Some universities had made some changes to their internal structures. There have been job losses at universities already. There have been private higher education. Some of them are actually in a happy place. Some are not so in a happy place.
With the numbers of...
with the numbers given to them. So some will be happy and some won't be, Navneet. It's a reality. When everything was already done and dusted, suddenly just while most institutions are having the end of the year parties and the Christmas parties, suddenly we need to go back to the drawing board. It is too late in the day to make any changes for the Feb intake for 2025. And now we are led to believe that caps may not happen at all. And let me tell you, if the caps don't happen now, it will not happen ever. The reason why I say this is that the elections will happen somewhere between March and May of next year. If, let's say, there is a change of government, so be it. They will again have to put the bill through lower house, upper house, Senate, debate, and then go through 6 months of time gone. Let's say if it is the same government, there is a great expectation that could be dependent on Greens for being in the position to,
if it's a hung
to run
parliament.
if it is a hung parliament. And Greens is very clear on its policy. So when I really look at it, the government will have to do something else. Now, if you ask me, am I happy that the caps are not going through? It's a very mixed emotion. First and foremost, without the caps, we have seen this year very dismal visa success rates from India. There were no caps, but the government would refuse one student and grant another student of the same caliber. We have seen slow visa processing. There is also something called Ministerial Direction 107, MD 107.
What could be the reasons?
Yeah, but the MD 107 was passed last year in December, just before the Christmas break. That gave the power to the government to prioritize visas for certain institutions over the others. Every 6 months, the assessment level of institutions change. But this year in September, it didn't change because the caps was going to come in. And guess what? 3 universities which were in assessment level 3 were going to come down to 2. Had the government changed it. Now we are in a situation that the universities have remained at the highest risk. They can't recruit. Caps is not happening. And believe me, you and I both know this. The handle of visa is very strong. Visas overseas can be refused without a process of appeal. Visa fee has gone to $1,600. So students are not going to be reapplying visas to get a visa. So here we are in a catch-22 situation. Caps won't happen, but we don't know what's our plan B because every single institution that I know, and believe me, I work with every single university in Australia, they had all planned for the world with caps now. So they don't have a plan B. Just they don't have a plan B. So we are in a very interesting situation as we speak, Navneet. Caps may not happen. Great. But there is no other second option. All around the world, things are changing now. And this is what I wanted this discussion to move to. Canada-India relationship, is it at the worst? You know Canada better than I do. It cannot go further down. And sooner than later, things will start to revive. They're also going in for an election. Something will happen. US and India relationship is going to be at the best for the next 4 years. Correct? It is bound to happen. The moment the US president becomes anti-China, it becomes pro-India. It's an equation. We've got the Indian Prime Minister in place for the next 4 years, 4.5 years. And you'll have the Trump as president for the next 4 years, and the Howdy Donald moment will be back. UK has just recently got a new government. The government has not changed the post-study work rights against what was expected, and things are going to be looking up. New Zealand is already going up. Ireland is going up. Europe has become a new destination, and caps, believe me, were not bad, and without caps, things will be back to what it was. So I think the life for Indian student going overseas, they'll have many options. Australia will have to compete in that place. And next 1 or 2 years is once again the time when Indian students would need options. You mentioned something while we were talking, was you used the word ESOS Bill and not caps, and it's fantastic. Because ESOS Bill, had it been passed, the government was working on the national code. ESOS Bill would have been followed by a national code, which would have put certain restrictions on agents owning private colleges, and would have put restrictions on onshore payment of commissions. ESOS Bill has not passed, so no national code. Lots of time wasted for all of us.
Because the topic that you have touched now was the onshore commissions. It is like airlines selling the tickets.
You know something, even with onshore commissions, I don't know, Navneet, I don't know why you've got me talking on it. Some people think that I'm the one who instigated this topic a few years ago when I did a blog on that topic, when I compared the process around the world.
Mm-hmm.
The onshore commission in Australia, there was no clarity even right now, because it's not mentioned in the ESOS Bill. It was something for the national code. Now, at the AIEC conference in Melbourne, somebody asked this question to the Department of Education, and Department of Education mentioned that it is only a kind of a barrier for those who are moving at the same level from one course to another. So there was commission if you were going from one degree to another degree, or one higher level, bachelor's to master's or something like that. But when I talk to the others, members of the same government, they will say there is just no way to segregate. So it will be a complete ban on onshore commission. So we have no written word anywhere whether it will be a full ban or was it intended to be only a partial thing. And guess what? Some mention that word commission will be removed and replaced with a service fee. Now, you and I both know it's the same thing. Now, instead of saying 5% or 10%, you'll say $1,500 or $2,000. You've seen the kind of stuff which goes on with professional year programs, where so much of cashback and cost cutting takes place. It's just opening another can of worms here. So having said this, all this is now a bit behind. We'll need to see what government does. It is possible that government could still edit the national code, because the way I have seen Minister Jason Clare, Jason Clare is actually with education, but let's say the both sides, the Home Affairs and education, they've been working very closely this time. In the past, they would often talk two different things. And I have a very strong feeling that the government will do whatever is there within their means to keep the student numbers low.
Keeping student numbers low, or having more numbers coming without having the cap, as long as there are genuine students being granted with the visas,
right?
As long as the dodgy agents or the people with the wrong practices are wiped out of the market, because there are number of good people in the industry as well who have been trying to do the right thing by saying no to the things which are no, rather than doing it only for the sake of the dollar value. What's your opinion as concluding remark on commission should stay or go?
No, well, I don't know about whether commission should stay. My personal feeling is that a student should not be allowed to change institutions for 1 year. Allowing them to change within the 6 months or 6 months is too short. A lot of effort goes offshore to recruit that student. The institution also spends a lot of time and money to bring them to Australia. So that is the first point. And there are sometimes genuine reasons why students want to move from one institution to another. So I can understand that. In fact, when you look at what New Zealand does, that is possibly the best thing they do. They link the visa to the education provider, to the institution. So if a student moves from one institution to another, they have to apply for a fresh visa. And fresh visa means fresh risk of it being denied or accepted. So I think that's a very fair system in place in New Zealand. That is something which we have been advocating to Australia. But, advocating to Australia means really nothing today, because sometimes the government also doesn't know which side it wants to sit in. Sometimes we don't even know who are the policy advisors. The people who were advising the government were clueless at a point of time. So the way I look at it, Navneet, all said and done, international students will remain a winner in Australia. Australia cannot survive without migrants, and best migrants are those who arrive as international students. So that's the first part. Australia cannot ignore India. That is the second part, because there was a tendency among certain institutions that they could fill up the numbers from China. After Trump coming into play in US, Australia has that message very clearly out there. India will continue to count. Okay. And last thing, and good you mentioned that you talked to the both education ministers recently. I also managed to talk to both of them in another forum. I think there is a bit of a mismatch between what India wants to get from Australia and what Australia wants to get from India. That will need to be sorted out. Australia feels that it can set up universities in India. India really needs. Well, Australia, I don't know whether India really needs them. India has tons of universities. What India needs is certain skills, certain TAFE skills and vocational skills. Then there is no business model. Who's going to pay for the plumber's education or the carpenter's education in India at the fees that Australia wants? And so all this will get sorted out in future. But what's most important is today we are sitting in that week when the Parliament is sitting in Canberra. CAP's bill has been opposed. There is a very small likelihood of it seeing the day. And we are all in for a very interesting Christmas break.
Vocational education, as Mr. Ravi Lochan Singh mentioned, is the topic to discuss on another day. But today, I just want to mention whichever government stays in power, comes in power, change of government, not only this time, even in the futures to come, international student is definitely the backbone for the economy of the country. On this note, just wanted to say thank you so much.
Thank you,
Ravi Lochan Singh.
Thank you very much.
My name is Navneet Anand, signing out for voiceaajkal, our medium, your message. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
VG Times. Be with the times.